Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mr. Eliphas Levi. This is Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. A particular note today is almost certainly going to be the Infinite Integrations playlist, where I teach you to do the things that we are going to be discussing today, or my book, where I do the same thing. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, with Chapter 11, The Magic Chain, Magnus Force. The great magical agent, termed by us the astral light, by others the soul of the earth, and designated by old chemists under the names of Azoth and Magnesia. This occult, unique, and indubitable force is the key of all empire, the secret of all power. It is the winged dragon of Medea, the serpent of the Edenic mystery. It is the universal glass of visions, the bond of sympathies, the source of love, prophecy, and glory. To know how to avail oneself of this agent is to be a trustee of God's own power. All real, effective magic, all occult force is there, and its demonstration is the sole end of all genuine books of science, and I recommend mine for that. To possess oneself of the great magical agent, there are two operations necessary: to concentrate and project, or, in other words, to fix and to move. Fixity has been provided as the basis and guarantee of movement by the author of all things. The magnet magus must go to work in a like manner. Now, what is being discussed here is the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. In order to explain that, we're going to hit the Holy Spirit real quick. Before the beginning, there was God, and God was infinite, with no bounds. God chose to become bound into creation and become creation, and at that moment became spirit. God is the infinite. Finite is spirit. Now, the spirit is quite literally everything in existence all at the exact same time. Every single element and all of the space between those elements is the spirit. In the beginning, that snapshot of time when it went from the infinite into the finite, that was the beginning. And everything was in stasis. All of the elements were there, but none of them have combined. And then God spoke, and he said, I am the light. And then he became the light, and it was good. He began the motion. These elements started combining, and the combination of the elements released light, and therefore there became light, and it was good. It was that moment of stasis being set into motion. That is the Logos, the word of creation, the breath of creation, the I am of the beginning. That is the Logos. The Logos is the spirit in motion. Every single instance of light, heat, motion, change, thought, anything dealing with moving from the now into the next is the Logos. It is the power of change through the electromagnetics of creation. Every single instance of two elements combining to form a compound is the spirit moving. It is the Logos. That is why the Logos cannot be personified into one person ever at any point in time. You, through force of will and practice and dedication, can take control of these forces of creation. I say that with a good deal of authority because I have done so. The Infinite Integrations, the Esoterica playlist, my book, we talk about the specifics of how I went about doing that. It is a process. It takes dedication, and if you are not dedicated to it, it is better not to begin it. But you can do things. I have healed myself. Now, that is with the will of God on my side, right? I am using the Holy Spirit to heal myself. I have healed myself of a cyst in my throat. I have healed myself of a shoulder injury from almost 25 years ago now. I've, for the most part, healed my back. I am in the process now of healing my leg. None of it has been immediate, none of it has been pain-free, and none of it has been without effort from me. Well, almost none of it, right? I didn't really have a whole lot to do with the breaking of the cyst. I have had a little bit to do with the strengthening of my voice since the cyst broke. Now, I move the energies. I take the energies, I move them to where they need to be. I focus upon the healing, and I created the healing. But all of that is the manipulation of the Holy Spirit. It is only through the direct will of the Lord God Almighty, who created all things and is unknowable in his entirety. That is how I did it. I explain it in some extreme detail in these playlists and in the book. And so I'm not going to get into the specifics here. There are warnings attached to the specifics. I do not speak, however, idly. I don't talk about something that I have not put into practice with real, measurable results. You're not going to believe my results. I am perfectly fine with that. Like, you might, but probably not. What do you mean you've been able to heal yourself? I tell you all of the time, the things that I tell you to do, which is for the most part prayer, fasting, and meditation, leads to the ability to be able to do this. I give you the details. I show you how to do it so that you can try it. Put it to the test. See if it works or not. It worked for me. That does not mean that it will for you. I believe that it will. Anything I can do, you can do better. You can do anything better than me. I believe that, right? I am not the best. I am merely dedicated enough to take the steps that are actually associated with it and open enough to the knowledge that I can get the real way to do it. These things have been recorded for a very long time. A lot of people believe the things that are contained in this book, and yet none of them have been able to actually do anything. I wonder what the problem might be. But we are talking about that power, right? That is what is being described here. All right. It is said that enthusiasm is contagious. And why? Because it cannot be produced in the absence of collective faith. Collective faith is a big word, right? That would imply more than one person, and you can be enthusiastic without anybody else, right? So it can be produced in the absence of collective faith. It can be produced entirely within your own faith, and that is not the collective. Is it amplified by the collective faith? Yes, absolutely. 2 or 3 people aligned in the same direction brings a magnifying power to it. That is a truth. But it is not dependent upon anyone else. You can be entirely enthusiastic about your path, about what you're doing, about anything, separately from anyone else. Faith produces faith. Water produces water. Light produces light. Earth produces earth. Breath produces breath. No, it has to come from somewhere else. Right? Faith is the belief that a thing will happen whether you can see it or not, right? Or that a thing exists, and people have faith in God, right? There will never be a proof that God exists, right? We can have all kinds of anecdotal evidence. These things happen to me, and therefore I believe that God exists, but I cannot give those to you. I can relay them to you, but it's not even my job to convince you that they are real. You have to come to that decision on your own. Faith is an entirely personal choice. Now, that does not mean that you cannot believe things that other people do, and in that way, someone else's faith can help produce your faith. But your faith comes from an internal part, and you don't have to have faith before faith manifests, right? Faith produces faith is a logical fallacy. It is cyclic reasoning, right? A equals B because A is A. Well, that's kind of right, but not in the long run. Faith produces faith is simply oversimplification at best, directly deceptive at worst. Back to the text. To believe is to have a reason for willing. To will with reason is to will with power. Neither one of those are untrue. Not, I say, with an infinite, but with an indefinite power. That again, right? Infinite means boundless without any end. Indefinite means that you don't know the end, and so yes. What operates in the intellectual and moral world obtains still more in the physical, and when Archimedes was in want of a lever to move the world, what he sought was simply the great magical arcanum. One arm of the androgyne figure of Henry Coenrath before the word coagula and the other solve. To collect and diffuse are nature's two words. But after what manner can we accomplish these operations with the astral light or soul of the world? Concentration. What is going on here? I am getting lag. Hold on, I gotta find where. Alright, here we are. What is going on? My computer is not this slow. Alright, concentration is by isolation and distribution by the magical chain. Wait, what? Concentration is by isolation and distribution by the magical chain. There should have been a comma right here. Isolation consists in the absolute independence for thought, complete liberty for the heart, and perfect continence for the senses. Absolute independence for thought, complete liberty for the heart, and perfect continence for the senses. I don't know about that, right? I don't know how to disagree with that, but I'm not in accordance with that for some reason. Every man who is possessed by prejudices and fears, every passionate person who is a slave of his passions is incapable of concentrating or coagulating, according to the expressions of Coenrath, the astral light or soul of the earth. Now that makes a little more sense, right? If you are ruled by your passions, then you are not going to be effective in this. Now, prayer, fasting, and meditation are the three keys to manifestation. Prayer is you talking to God in any way, shape, form, or anything. If you are actively directing your thoughts, that is prayer. Fasting is the denial of things, right, whether that be food, drink, or other substances, so that you can better listen to the will of God. Meditation is the complete absence of thought, allowing God to talk back to you. All three of these things take a bit of dedication to accomplish, right? If you are asking, you're not meditating. If you're moving the energy, you're not meditating. Meditation is the getting rid of these passions and prejudices. It takes time, right? Getting there one time is not going to give you the ability to master these things. You have to develop over time the capacity to achieve this at will, right? There is a certain state of harmony that comes over you in a meditative state. Once you have dismissed all of your thoughts, right? You're going to be thinking, like if you're starting to meditate, it is going to be exceedingly difficult. There will be thoughts popping in all of the time, and you will chase those thoughts. The key to meditation is that when those thoughts come in, you don't chase them. You're like, oh, there's a thought, let it go. And then you return to your breath work, or you return to your light work, or whatever you're having to do to get into that state. Now, the willful direction of your breath, you're not in the meditative state yet. The willful direction of the light, you are not in the meditative state yet. The meditative state, the achievement of the near nirvana, because nirvana is nothingness, but the achievement of near nirvana, the achievement of enlightenment, comes from the ability to cast off those thoughts and to redirect yourself into the meditative state at will. Right? That is where the mastery of that comes from. It is a process. It takes dedication. Idle thoughts, prejudices, passions that come into your meditative practices or into your manifestation practices will put a lens upon it, right? You are directing this light. It is a white, pure light, right? Surrounded by darkness in equal proportions. When you have wrath, you are coloring that light red. When you have envy, you are coloring that light screen, right? That is casting something upon your manifestation that will manifest in your manifestation. So if you are envious, you will be manifesting envy. If you are wrathful, you will be manifesting wrath. That is what you will be calling into your life, and that is why it is so important to be able to set aside your prejudices and passions through the meditative process before you begin to do any of the light work, right? Don't attempt to move the light right away. Most of you will. Most of you will feel the repercussions from doing so. Wait. It is worth waiting. Back to the text. All true adepts have been independent, even amidst torture, sober and chaste till death. And again, this is simply not true. Right? In a sense, it is. Once you have achieved adeptship, which I do claim, right? I don't claim master, I claim adept. I have done things, therefore I am at least an adept. You don't have to be sober and chaste all the time. That is simply not true. As a matter of fact, if you are doing that, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Life is about balance, not exclusion, walking between the pillars of Boaz and Yakin, not cleaving to either one. The way is rather narrow. And there are good reasons to be sober and chaste, alternately, for different reasons, at different points in time. But neither one of those is a goal, right? You shouldn't be ruled by drink, but it is okay to have a drink. You shouldn't be ruled by sex, but it is okay to have sex. These are things that are true. If they were not true, they would not be walking between the path, right? Staying between the pillars. If you are never having sex, you're cleaving to the white pillar. If you're always having sex, you're cleaving to the black pillar. You're supposed to be in the middle. Okay, so you are independent. That is a thing. Sober and chaste with reason. And even amidst torture, yes, right? Even when things are absolutely terrible, you are still finding the truth and the growth and all of the things. I have a very recent experience with that, right? Even in the midst of the pain of breaking my leg, I was still operating on my willful level, right? I'm not holding antagonism towards the antagonist. I'm letting the process play out without my intervention. I am not wishing ill upon them, right? I find the lesson in the trial. That would be the torture. Sometimes the lesson sucks. Sometimes there is pain attached to the lesson. That is simply part of life. Back to the text. The explanation of such anomaly is this. In order to dispose of a force, you must not be surprised by this force in a way that it may dispose of you. That is true. But then, cry out for those who seek only magic for the method of inordinately satisfying the lust of nature. What good is a power which must not be used for our own satisfaction? And again, this is the problem too, right? You should never manifest anything directly dealing with someone else's free will. That includes love, sex, attention, right? You should not be manifesting any specific person into your life. You should not be manifesting into someone else's life anything that might oppose their free will in the slightest way. And so, you absolutely should not be using magic to do this. But you can. It is entirely within your power to alter someone else's state of mind. You can do that. It is stupid. Do not do that, please. If you do not take any other warning from anything that I say, take that one. Do not interfere with anyone else's free will in the slightest way. Like even to the point of healing someone. Have express consent before you do it. And I can't put it any plainer than that. The reverberations for interfering with others' free will is immense. Back to the text. Unhappy creatures who ask, if I told you, how could you grasp it? Are pearls nothing because they are worthless to the horde of Epicurus? Did not Curtius prefer the government of those who had gold than its possession by himself? Must we not be something removed from the common man when we almost pretend to be a god? I do not pretend to be a god in any shape, right? We are all a divine representative equally. None of us are entirely God. None of us, and if you have ever put your hands upon it or have been able to, they weren't God either. Moreover, I grieve to deject or discourage you, but I am not devising the transcendental sciences. I teach them. That's debatable. Defining their immutable necessities in the presentation of their primary and most inexorable conditions. One thing that I have noticed about these books, right, they talk about theory an awful lot. None of them give you practical applications. I have, right, I did that in my book. It's also part, like if you were a member, you have access to me reading the book. I'm not going to link the playlist because almost nobody can get to it, but there is a playlist directly for my book. It's a lot cheaper than buying the book. If you want to get it that way, you're more than welcome. It is there, available. And I talk about the details. I talk about how to pull the energy and how to push the energy and all of the preparations that go into it. We have not seen that, right? We have seen many of theory, but none of the practical. So when he says that he's teaching it, especially since half of this is incorrect anyway, right? We have had severe reasons to disagree with many of the things that he has been talking about so far, right? Like a direct misunderstanding of the virtues and vices, for example. That is fundamental to getting everything correct. Like, really fundamental. Equal with understanding that there is a power is getting those things right. Pythagoras was a free, sober, and chaste man. So, right, we talk often about how asceticism is giving in to one of the sins, right? I am better than you because I only eat bread and water. I am better than you because I don't ever have sex. I am better than you because I never drink alcohol. I am better than you. That is what the ascetic life is, right? You are meant to eat meat and vegetables. You are meant to have sex, but not with everyone. You are meant to have possessions, just not all of them. You are meant to have a little bit of pride, but not to the point where you think that you're a god. You are meant to balance the virtues and the vices completely. Free, sober, and chaste is not balancing anything. That is out of balance. That is cleaving to the one pillar and completely forsaking the other. And life is balance. Apollonius of Tyana and Julius Caesar were both repellent austerity. The sex of Paracelsus was suspected. So foreign was he to the weakness of love. Raymond Lully called the severity of life to the most exalted point of asceticism, and again, pride. Jerome Cardan exaggerated the practice of fasting till he nearly perished of starvation. Pride, if we may accept tradition. Agrippa, poor and buffeted from town to town, almost died of misery rather than yield to the caprice of a princess who insulted the liberty of science. What then made the felicity of these men? The knowledge of great secrets and consciousness of power. Like, I didn't say pride for this one, right? Poor and buffeted from town to town, he almost died of misery. Now, I'm not familiar with this story. I'm going off of this sentence. Rather than yield to the caprice of a princess who insulted the liberty of science. That is exactly what Socrates did, right? Socrates died for monotheism. Completely separate from the Jews or Jesus, right? Prior to Jesus. He died for monotheism. He was like, yeah, there's a God. It's just not the ones you believe in. And that's what they killed him for. And he went willingly to that death because he was standing on truth, right? There is a difference between pride and standing on truth, right? Pride is, I believe this thing, and so I'm going to stand upon it. Truth is, this thing is real, and so I am going to stand upon it. Standing upon truth is more important than anything, right? If you know a thing to be true, you have to stand on it. Otherwise, you are out of alignment with your own soul. If you know that this thing is true and you don't follow that, you are betraying your own self. And so I don't call this pride. I call this humbleness. Even though other people will take it as pride. But Caprice is pride. He was standing in opposition of a princess who was stating something not true. Well, that is humbleness. That is bravery. What then made the felicity of these men? The knowledge of great secrets and the consciousness of power. It was sufficient for those great souls. Must one be like unto them in order to know what they knew? Assuredly not. But the existence of this book is perhaps a case in point. But in order to do what they did, it is absolutely necessary to take the means which they took. And again, no, right? I have done things being discussed. Now, you don't have to believe that. I have to relay that. It is one of the conditions placed upon me. I have used the forces of electromagnetics, the Holy Spirit, to heal myself. I am not ascetic, right? I could pull up this little jar full of herb right here. I partake in it regularly. It is not, however, my desire in life, right? I use it for specific purposes. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with getting drunk every once in a while as long as it is not your daily desire. There is nothing wrong with the vices, intrinsically, in moderation. Anyone who is telling you that there is leading you down the wrong path, right? In order to do what they did, it is absolutely necessary to take the means which they took. So in order to accomplish anything, I have to die in opposition to a princess. Got you. Okay. No, right? What you have to do is put in the dedication. Prayer, fasting, and meditation. I will stand on those three things every time. There are other things attached to it. You have to learn how to do the light work, right? You have to learn to recognize the two sources. You have to learn to recognize the power of it moving through you. You got to learn to flex your chakras. All of these things are necessary. Now, how you do that may not be exactly the way that I do it. It may be different. But you don't have to completely abstain from sex. You don't have to completely abstain from alcohol. You don't have to completely abstain from meat. You don't have to completely abstain from carbs. Right? All of that is wrong. All of it. There are times when you need to do all of those things. But it is not all of the time. That is pride. I am better than you because of this thing. And pride will lead you to your fall, not to your betterment. I wonder how many of these people died early. Back to the text. But what did they actually accomplish? They astonished and subdued the world. That's big, right? Big words. Subdued the world. That is a big word. They reigned more truly than kings. Magic is an instrument of divine goodness or demonic pride. But it is the annihilation of earthly joys and the pleasures of mortal life. No, it is not. It is an enhancer of earthly joys and pleasures of mortal life if you are doing it correctly. Why study it? Ask the luxurious. Merely to know it, and possibly after to learn mistrust and stupid unbelief and puerile credulity. Men of pleasure, and half of these I count for so many women, is not gratified curiosity highly pleasurable? Read therefore without fear. You will not be magicians against your will. That is true. Readiness for absolute renunciation is, moreover, necessary only in order to establish universal currents and transform the face of the world. And again, I stand in opposition to that. Right? Absolute renunciation, no. Partial renunciation for times, yes, right? Fasting is a renunciation of eating or sexual pleasure or imbibing in substances. That is fasting. It serves a purpose. It does. But it is not the purpose. It is not the goal. It is not even something to strive to do regularly. right? It should be situational, right? There are times when you will know I need to fast, when you have a decision. But to fast according to a calendar, right? This day is set aside for everyone to fast, makes no difference in real life whatsoever. That is not a personal dedication. It is adhering to a dogma. There's no point in that, right? Complete or absolute renunciation is not necessary to establish universal currents or to transform the face of the world. Now, transform the face of the world is not something that you probably should be goal oriented towards. That can have some severe repercussions. It is much more recommended to work on your personal self. Back to the text. There are relative magical operations limited to a certain circle which do not need such heroic virtues. We can act upon passions by passions, determine sympathies and antipathies, hurt, even, and heal, without possessing the omnipotence of the magus. In this case, however, we must realize the risk of a reaction in proportion to the action to which we may easily fall a victim. All this will be explained in our ritual. And as I told you prior, right, even when you're doing healing, you should be exceedingly careful and make sure that you have consent. Realize the risk of a reaction in proportion to the action. Now, y'all can't see it, but I got the rules up here behind me. There are 8 laws of creation. They are listed in the Infinite Integrations and the Esoterica playlist. I'm not sure which videos I want to put up. It might be one of them, but I don't think so today. To make the magic chain is to establish a magnetic current, which becomes stronger in proportion to the extent of the chain. We shall see in the ritual how these currents can be produced and what are the various modes of forming the chain. So maybe we will be seeing some practical application in the second half of this book. That'll be interesting because I have done some practical application, and it'll be interesting to see how they compare. Mesmer's trough was an exceedingly imperfect magic chain. Several great circles of Illuminati in different northern countries possess more potent chains. Even that association of Catholic priests, celebrated for their occult power and their unpopularity, is established upon the plan and follows the conditions of the most potent magical chains, and herein is the secret of their force, which they attribute solely to the grace or will of God, a vulgar and cheap solution for every mystery of power and influence or attraction. I also attribute mine to the grace and will of God. Now, I am directing it. That is true. But I do nothing outside of the will of God. I seek the will of God before I perform magical actions, even healing upon myself. That is a practice that you probably should put into place as well. I don't know that I even put that part in the book, and I probably should have. In the ritual, it will be our task to estimate the sequence of truly magical ceremonies and evocations which make up the great works of vocation under the name of the exercises of Saint Ignatius. Here, I am going to hit one thing that I have hit several times prior, and I am sure we will hit as we go through the ritual. None of those things hold power in and of themselves, right? The point of learning a ceremony in the correct way is so that you can keep your mindset in the correct manner. It is not intrinsic to the ceremony. It is to keep you aligned. That is why people have different ceremonies. None of the tools have power in and of themselves, and so none of them are correct. None of them are the truly magical ceremonies. None of them. They are all directly due to your will and the use thereof. These ceremonies are to keep you magically aligned with your intentions, and they may or may not be effective in that, depending on what you are doing. If you are drawing a circle with a pentagram on the ground in order to trap a demon, it's probably not going to work for a variety of reasons, but the most important one being that none of these entities are going to allow the publication of any document which allows them to be captured. They live on a different plane than you. They have a better understanding than you, and that you have a ceremony that purports to be able to contain a demon. It was probably placed there by that demon in order to keep you deceived so that they can take advantage of you, not so that you can take advantage of them. All enthusiasm propagated in a society by a series of communications and practices in common produces a magnetic current and continues or increases by the current. That is a truth. That is a deep, fundamental truth that most people do not even realize. When our forefathers here in the United States came to the conclusion that they were going to form a separate union, they came up with a brand new god. They called her Columbine. They named the District of Columbia after her, or Columbia. She represents freedom. The direction of energy towards Columbia created the freedom that we enjoy. I know, that sounds a little bit woo-woo, right? We deal with woo-woo over here. The intrinsic belief of a society creates power. That is evidenced through the Inquisition, right? Enough people believed in this thing to create this situation. The witch trials of Salem and the eastern United States is the exact same thing. The belief of this society created a power which carried itself away to great injustice. The belief in liberty is a fundamental one here. It is something that enough people hold on to that we are willing to fight for, that it exists here, isolated from the rest of the world, because if you think they have liberty elsewhere, you haven't been elsewhere, right? This is an intrinsic thing, and it doesn't matter what the belief is. If enough people believe that murder is okay, then that's what the society will energetically invest into. We kind of have that problem now. The beliefs that we hold fundamentally shape the direction that we go. There is no getting around that. You can change your beliefs. You can become dedicated to a better set of practices. But anything that we hold in common is going to lead to that end, right? You can see that manifest in the desert regions of the Near East with a particular religion, where they have come to the agreement that if you disagree, they can throw you off of a building or hit you in the head with rocks, right? The practice and the beliefs of a system or a people do indeed produce a current that carries you along with it. That is an important one, right? I don't even know that I explained that well enough. Back to the text. The action of the current is to carry away and often to exalt beyond measure persons who are impressionable and weak, nervous organizations, temperaments inclined to hysteria or hallucination. See the Salem witch trials, or the Inquisition for that matter. Such people soon become powerful vehicles of magical force and efficiently project the astral light in the direction of the current itself. Opposition at such a time to the manifestations of the force is, to some extent, a struggle with fatality. When the youthful Pharisee, Saul, or Sheol, I've never seen that particular interpretation. We didn't do a word study on Saul's name. I guess maybe we should have. His name is Sheol, the land of the dead. Really? When the youthful Pharisee Saul, or Sheol, threw himself with all the fanaticism and all the determination of a sectarian across the aggressive line of Christianity, he unconsciously placed himself at the mercy of a power against which he thought to prevail, and hence he was struck down by a formidable magnetic flash, doubtless the more instantaneous by reason of the combined effect of cerebral congestion and sunstroke. Interesting. The conversion of a young Israelite, Alphonsus de Ratisbonne, is a contemporary fact which is absolutely of the same nature. I want to point out something, right? Let's take this back, right? Saul taught Gnosticism by and large, right? That is not a direct one-on-one corollary, but you can definitely read into the works of Saul Gnostic writings. There is no reason to lend any extra credence to Saul. Saul did not study at the foot of Jesus, right? Saul was in direct opposition to every single one of the apostles who actually studied at the feet of Jesus. That is evidenced through the text. When they are talking about the contention between the apostles, it is between Paul and Peter, right? The rock upon which this church is formed and the guy which everybody actually formed the church upon, right? It is direct contention between them on doctrine. That is a thing. And so you shouldn't place any extra accordance to Paul than you do to me, right? I give my things because of a spiritual experience. It had nothing to do with Jesus. Now, he was directly attacking Jesus when he had his spiritual experience, right? But that is him who never saw the man saying that he saw the man. That doesn't mean that that's who he saw. It could have been the angel Michael. It could have been the angel Gadriel. It could have been Satan. It could have been whoever. It could have been Baal. The evil entities have the capacity to lie to you. It's possible that he actually saw Jesus. It is highly unlikely for reasons of the Bible. But it is possible. But it is important to note that if he did have a spiritual experience directly at the hands of Jesus, what came out of that was not the teachings of Jesus. That's kind of an important thing. All right, back to the text. We are acquainted with a sect of enthusiasts whom it is common to deride at a distance and to join, despite oneself, as soon as they are approached, even with a hostile intention. I will go further and affirm that magic circles and magnetic currents establish themselves and have an influence according to fatal laws upon those on whom they can act. Magical circles and magnetic currents establishing themselves, I'm going to go with a big no on them. The magnetic currents do, right? That is literally the Holy Spirit acting. There is magnetic attraction between all of these elements around me right now. So yes, there are currents. The magical circles, however, that's a tool. And it has no power of itself, and therefore it cannot establish itself. You have to invest your energy into the circle for it to do anything. It has no power intrinsic of itself. The same way that these stones hold no power in and of themselves, but they can be used for a purpose. In the same way that this knife is not going to do anything by itself, it has to be used with purpose. Tools cannot do anything if you do not inject them with will. And that most certainly includes magic circles. Now, the magnetic currents, that is different because that is quite literally the Holy Spirit logos in action. So they do things on their own. Each one of us is drawn within a circle of relations which constitutes his world, and to the influence of which he is made subject. The lawgiver of the French Revolution, that man whom the most spiritual notion in the whole world acknowledged as the incarnation of human reason, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, was drawn into the most lamentable action of his life, the desertion of his children. Hold the fuck up. The man, like maybe there's an extenuating circumstance. Let's finish the sentence. By the magnetic influence of a libertine circle and a magic current of a table d'hôte. Okay, I was like, maybe they killed him, right? The man whom the most spiritual nation in the whole world acknowledged as the incarnation of human reason was drawn into the most lamentable action of his life, the desertion of his children, the incarnation of human reason, the man, the only man on the world ever, in the history of ever, who can be the epitome of reason, was drawn into abandoning his progeny by magnetic influence? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There has to be an extenuating circumstance for that to make sense. By the magnetic influence of a libertine circle and a magical current of a table d'hôte. He describes it simply and ingeniously in his confessions, but it is a fact which has remained unobserved. Great circles very often make great men, and vice versa. So, what I am getting from this, and it is not explained, is that he was part of this libertine circle and a magical current of a table d'hôte. Let's do this. Once again, I'm going to pop out the definition. A menu where a multi-course from the menu of an American hotel in Buffalo. A multi-course meal with only a few choices are charged at a fixed price. What does this have to do at all with, comes from French, the host table? Yeah, this has nothing to do with magic, right? This is just the table he happened to be around, right? That's my assumption, is that he was involved in this thing which carried him away from his children. But that would definitely assume that there is not a whole lot of reason being applied, right? There are reasons to leave your children for a short period of time. Go to work, travel, or something along those nature. There is no reason to abandon your children. If you are doing that, if you have abandoned your children or your responsibilities in that manner, you have not reached enlightenment at all, and you cannot be the epitome of human reason. Those two things are diametrically opposed. Your children need you. You are intrinsic to their life, whether you are a man or a woman. If you have kids, they need you. Period. The end. Back to the text. There are no unrecognized geniuses. There are eccentric men, and the term would seem to have been invented by an adept. The man who is eccentric in his genius is the one who attempts to form a circle by combating the central attractive force of established chains and currents. It is his destiny to be broken or to succeed. I have definitely broken the established chains and currents. If you are unaware, I've got several playlists that will point that out to you, beginning with the Bible study. I have broken several established chains and currents, this book being one of them. Now, what is the twofold condition of success in such a case? A central point of stability and a persevering circular action of initiative. Not unreasonable. The man of genius is one who has discovered a real law. I've got 8 of them, and is thereby possessed of an invincible active and grinding power. He may die in the midst of his work, but that which he has willed comes to pass in spite of his death, and is indeed often ensured thereby. Because death is a veritable assumption for genius. What? Death is a veritable assumption for everyone. It will, in fact, happen to everyone. You can assume that everyone will die. That is veritable, which means true, right? That is a true assumption. Everyone will die. Not just geniuses. Now, it might be true that genius can lead you to an earlier death, especially if you exercise that genius in contrast to the established control systems. See Copernicus, see Socrates, right? The controlling systems definitely put them to death for their genius. And so, yes, but there have been plenty of geniuses who have not died an untimely death. Back to the text. When shall I be lifted up from the earth? Said the greatest of the initiators. I will draw all things after me. The law of magnetic currents is that of the movement of the astral light itself, which is always double and augments any opposite sense. A great action invariably paves the way for a reaction of equal magnitude, and the secret of phenomenal success consists entirely in the foreknowledge of reactions. It is important to note that the law of returns is that there will be a great action will invariably pave the way for a reaction. My personal understanding is that it is not equal, right? There is a multiplicative element that goes into it. As we refer to that as the law of three, but that is just the beginning. The first time you get presented with a lesson and you fail to learn it, you receive repercussions magnified by 3 from that action. The second time that you make that mistake, it is a greater magnifier. Now, what that greater magnifier is depends entirely upon the situation. It might be a times 5 or a times 6 or a times 10, but 3 is the minimum. There is a magnifying effort of at least 3, and for every action you take, there will be 3 unintended consequences, at least. That is a truth. That is something that, again, I very rarely say truth. I very rarely say 100%. That is one that seems to be fairly solid. I have the 8 laws of creation. That is one of them. So it's not necessarily equal magnitude. It is an appropriate magnitude. And the secret of phenomenal success consists entirely in the foreknowledge of reactions. You will not have an entire knowledge of the reactions. Like I just said, there will be 3 unintended reactions. You can visualize, I want this thing. And it can be so simple that you cannot even imagine that there will be a reverberation. I need a pencil. I'm going to manifest a pencil. There will be 3 unintended consequences to that, and you won't know what they are. That pencil might break. You might tear through the paper. There might be something, right? But there will be 3 unintended consequences. One of them will be positive. 2 of them will be negative. That is simply how it works. Now, again, that is a minimum of 3. There may be more. Thus, de Chateaubriand, penetrated with disgust at the saturnalia of the Revolution, foresee and prepare for the immense success of his Genius of Christianity. I'm unfamiliar with the work. To oppose oneself to a current at the beginning of its revolution is to court being destroyed by that current, like the great and unfortunate Emperor Julian. To oppose oneself to a current which has run its round is to take the lead of a contrary current. That's what I'm kind of doing. The great man is he who comes seasonably and knows how to innovate opportunely. I wouldn't call me great. In the days of the apostles, Voltaire would have found no echo for his utterances and might have been merely an ingenious parasite at the banquets of Trimalcion. Now, at the epoch wherein we live, everything is ripe for a fresh outburst of evangelical zeal and Christian self-devotion, precisely by reason of the prevailing general disillusion, egoistic positivism, and public cynicism of the coarsest interest. It is important to note that the exact opposite of that happened. Right? This is the early 19th century, the beginning of the age of reason in reality, where we discovered many things, including all of the elements on the periodic table, the electron microscope, the ability to see farther into space, the ability to go to space, to fly, the automobile. All of those things were in the future for him. At the turn of the 19th century, we did not get a burst of evangelic zeal or Christian self-devotion. There were isolated pockets of it, but for the most part, no. We got a scientific revolution which led away from that. Now, I stand firmly that most people are unaware. They don't even read their own source material all the way through. Many people set out every year with the determination, I'm going to read through the Bible, and they don't do it, right? They get through Genesis, maybe they get through Exodus, they get to Leviticus, and all the begats just shut them down. That's generally how it works. But even then, they don't even really read the book in the way that is necessary to get a good understanding of it. There's no word studies for most people. There is no contextual self-references from other places. Most of that doesn't happen. And that is why this fundamentally flawed control system has been allowed to flourish in the manner that it has. Right? Most people are ignorant. Most people don't care. And so it is easy to convince them with a good story. Now, reading through the Bible, it is quite obvious that it should not be taken for a reference. That does not mean that there is not some truth in there, again. But the Old Testament, we read through it almost entirely. Not entirely, we didn't get through every book, but we got through most of them. We got through all of the major ones, right? We did the first 5, and then we did most of the prophets. We did the Revelations. We did the first 3 Gospels for sure. We did part of the 4th Gospel. Like, we did a good bit of it. We didn't do all of it, but we did a good bit. And the parts that we did, right, the first 5 books, are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. These things did not happen in the manner in which they were described, right? And you can get that directly from the book, right? One of my major contentions is the first sacrifice out of the garden. That's not even taking into account that God didn't know that Adam and Eve were going to eat the apple, right? God was tricked. He didn't have a clue, right? But then we get to the sacrifice, and then that whole contradictory problem, right? That there are these 2 brothers. One of them is acting in accordance with God. He is planting his crops, and he's harvesting them. And then the other one is keeping animals, and he kills one and makes a sacrifice out of it. Well, there's a big problem with that. They weren't allowed to eat meat until after the flood. That is a directly contradictory problem with Genesis. Like, directly with itself in the same book. If you're making a sacrifice of meat before you were allowed to eat the meat, why are you doing it? Their clothes were made out of leaves, not animal skins. Why are you doing it? What is the point? Why are you killing this animal if you can't eat it? Right? That is an intrinsic problem with Genesis. That is an intrinsic problem with the story. It invalidates all the rest of it. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be truth contained in it, but if there is directly contradictory information inside the same chapter of the same book, you got a problem. We've seen that here, but it is very evident as you read through the Bible that most people have no idea. And a simple misunderstanding is whatever, right? If you are properly aligned with Christianity and you are doing the things that Christ said to do, you are perfectly fine. Right? You are acting in accordance with the betterment of humanity, at least. Now, there were some misleading guidance in there, right? You're not supposed to never have sex. You're not supposed to give away all of your things, right? You're not supposed to never defend yourself. Those are problems, right? But it is separate from the fundamental problem that the book, that entire Christianity is based off of the Old Testament. It is a change completely from all of the beliefs of the Old Testament, but it is based upon the Old Testament. Well, the Old Testament is fundamentally broken in a variety of places, like many places. And so the whole thing's got a problem. Right off the top, there is problems with the understanding of Christianity. I am firmly of the belief that there are only 2 types of pastors. There are the ones that are too stupid to read the book and understand what it says, and then there are the ones who read the book, understand what it says, and intentionally deceive you. That's all I can take from it, because the reason that most people leave the seminary is because they read the book and lose their faith. It's not because of financial problems. It's not because they can't keep up with the coursework. It is because they lose their faith from reading the book. And they refuse to apologize for it. They stand in that truth. And so they just leave and they go their own way and they stay quiet. That's generally how that happens. All right, let's get off of that soapbox. The success of certain books and the mystical tendencies of mind are unequivocal symptoms of this widespread disposition. We restore and we build churches only to realize more keenly that we are void of belief, only to long the more for it. Once more does the whole world await its Messiah, and he cannot tarry in its coming. Let a man, for example, come forward, who, by rank or by fortune, is placed in an exalted position, a pope, a king, even a Jewish millionaire, and let this man publicly and solemnly sacrifice all of his material interests for the weal of humanity. Let him make himself the savior of the poor, the disseminator, and even the victim, of doctrines of a renunciation and charity, and he will draw round him an immense following. He will accomplish a complete moral revolution in the world. But the high place is before all these things necessary for such a personage, because in these days of meanness and trickery, any word issuing from the lower ranks is suspected of interested ambition and imposture. Yea, then, ye who are nothing, ye who possess nothing, aspire not to be apostles or messiahs. If you have faith and would act in accordance therewith, get possession, in the first place, of the means of action, which are the influence of rank and the prestige of fortune. In olden times, gold was manufactured by science. Nowadays, science must be remade by gold. We have fixed the volatile, and we must now volatilize the fixed. In other words, we have materialized spirit, and we must now spiritualize matter. The most sublime utterance now passes unheeded, if it goes forth without the guarantee of a name, that is to say, of a success, which represents a material value. What is the worth of a manuscript? That of the author's signature among the booksellers? That established reputation known as Alexander Dumas at sea represents one of the literary guarantees of our time. But the house of Dumas is in repute only for the romances, which are its exclusive productions. Let Dumas devise a magnificent utopia, or discover a splendid solution of the religious problem, and no one will take them seriously, despite the European celebrity of the panurge of modern literature. We are in the age of acquired positions, where everyone is appraised according to his social and commercial standing. Unlimited freedom of speech has produced such a strife of words that no one inquires what is said, but who has said it. If it be Rothschild, His Holiness Pius IX, or even Monsignor Dupanloup, it is something. But if it be Tartempian, it is nothing, were he even, which is possible after all, an unrecognized prodigy of genius, knowledge, and good sense. Hence, to those who would say to me, if you possess the secret of great success, and of a force which can transform the world, why do you not make use of them? I would answer, this knowledge has come to me too late for myself, and I have spent over its acquisition the time and the resources which might have enabled me to apply it. There's a good explanation, right? Now, I will tell you straight off the top, I'm broke folk, right? I have a house. We are able to pay our bills. I am provided for, but we don't have extra spending money. I can't spend $20 outside of the budget. That's just not something I can do. I'm broke folk. But that is because I refuse to manifest money, right? I manifest truth. I manifest healing. I manifest growth. I manifest the spiritual fruit of love. But I do not manifest money. It is not my intention to manifest money. I am fully aware that I will be provided for. I believe that I am working in a way that will eventually provide some financial remuneration. But that is not the intention of what I do here. I do this knowing full well that I have a very small audience. Right? Most people will not make it through one of my studies. If you are making it through multiple, it is because you are seeking knowledge in a way that most people do not. I don't have the material things because I do not manifest them. I could. I know how to make the deals. I know how to make the blood oaths. I know how to make the contracts. I don't do it because I am intrinsically opposed to it. All right? If the material comes to me because I am standing for the truth, then so be it. I will take it and I will put it to work. I don't want to acquire money to die with money. I want to put it to work to help as many people as I possibly can. That is the goal for my money. But I don't manifest it. And what he's saying right here is not, I am taking a principled stand. It is, well, I came to it too late for it to be any good. Well, I stand to differ with you, Mr. Sir, because you did not die for a while. After this book was written, you could have manifested it. You just weren't manifesting correctly, and hopefully you had the understanding that manifesting the material is always going to be a bad idea. Now, you can have desires, right? You can have this goal that I want, and you can even manifest it, as long as you are not doing it in a greedy manner. Like, I want things. I want more. I'm just not willing to magically influence those. That is the hard line that you have to take if you're going to be an adept. Please, again, another warning, don't try to manifest the physical. I manifest the situation which will lead to success, which will allow you to get the physical, right? I am out here working pretty much every day, right, trying to disseminate truth, to show people how to do things in a correct manner. Whether that rewards me or not, right? I'm not getting paid a lot from this. I make about $30 from YouTube. Now, if people decide that they want to give me a super thanks or join me for a membership, that adds to it. But the revenue I get from YouTube is between $20 and $30 a month. That is not some significant financial remuneration. That doesn't mean that it won't increase in the future. But I've been doing this for 3 years, almost 4 now. And it's not about the finances. It is about the process. It is about the truth that will eventually lead to success. But that is not the goal of the project. And this lets us know, once again, why he abandoned his principles in order to, go back to what he had already once abandoned. All right, back to the text. I offer it to those who are in a position to avail themselves of it. Illustrious men, rich men, great ones of this world, who are dissatisfied with that which you have, who are conscious of a nobler and larger ambition. Will you be fathers of a new world, kings of a rejuvenated civilization? A poor and obscure scholar has found the lever of Archimedes, and he offers it to you for the good of humanity alone, asking nothing whatsoever in exchange. The phenomena which have quite recently perturbed America and Europe as regards the table-turning and fluidic manifestations are simply magnetic currents at the beginning of their formation, appeals on the part of nature inviting us, for the good of humanity, to re-establish the great sympathetic and religious chains. As a fact, stagnation in the astral light would mean death to the human race, and torpor in this secret agent has already been manifested by alarming symptoms of decomposition and death. For example, cholera morbus, the potato disease, and the blight of the grape are traceable solely to this cause. As the 2 young shepherds of La Salette saw darkly and symbolically in their dream. Okay, so you can absolutely find causation regardless of whether it is actually corroborated, right? You can say that this ball fell and it caused an earthquake on the other side of the planet because the timing happened to be right. Does not make it true. Bacterial theory, that exists whether or not anybody actually understands it. The Black Plague was not caused by people behaving in the wrong manner. Now, there are energetic reverberations to doing the wrong thing, and some of those consequences can be that these bacteria come upon you or these viruses come upon you. That is a true thing. But the potato disease was caused by what? Right? Right? So the fact, right? The potato disease primarily impacted Ireland, right? That this is literally talking about the time of the potato famine. That was caused directly by the decisions that the British made to intentionally starve the Irish people. And then they started growing a potato that did not have the proper climatic necessities, and it developed a blight. And then those potatoes died, right? That was possibly linked to the British, but it was affected upon the Irish, right? There was an intentional starvation of a people's genocide, if you will, that happened. And you're saying that was due to the bad energy of who? You can attribute any bad thing to the divine providence, right? I just had my leg broken. I have learned significantly from that. I learned some humbleness. I learned patience. I've learned several lessons from this. It was even, in my estimation, divinely inspired. It was not necessarily bad, right? There are lessons to be learned even in the worst parts. But to attribute my neighbor's actions, which he took of his own free will, as God punishing me for something is wild, right? Now, many people will probably say that because of the stances that I take. Well, you are being punished because of the stances you take against Christianity. Well, I haven't had any of the fruits of the Spirit disappear. I've had a little bit of pain, but, I mean, if you're a Christian, you have to associate righteousness with pain, right? At least to a small degree, some kind of persecution because you're on the right path, right? If you read through the book of Job, it tells you explicitly that it is not due to your actions that you are being punished. Like, that's what Job tells you, right? Job starts off with, this was a perfect man, doing all of the correct things in exactly the correct manner, and still he was punished as a temptation, right? Correlation and causation, not necessarily the same. Back to the text. The unlooked-for credit which awaited their narrative, and the vast concourse of pilgrims attracted by a statement so singular and, at the same time, so vague as that of these two children without instruction and almost without morality, are proofs of the magnetic reality of the fact and the fluidic tendency of the earth itself to operate the cure of its inhabitants. Superstitions are instinctive. And all that is instinctive is founded in the very nature of things, to which fact the skeptics of all times have given insufficient attention. We attribute, then, all the strange phenomena of table turning to the universal magnetic agent in search of a chain of enthusiasms, with a view to the formation of fresh currents. The force, and if you're unaware, the table turning events were a spiritual thing that happened in the late 1800s. We went through quite extensively in Isis Unveiled, maybe, from Mrs. Blavatsky, several details of this. So if you're interested, that is definitely somewhere to check. It's part of the Esoterica playlist, and Mrs. Blavatsky has her own. Okay. The force of itself is blind, but it can be directed by the will of man. That is true. And is influenced by prevailing opinions. That is also true. I talk an awful lot about energetic investments, right? You can invest yourself energetically into tools or ceremonies and feed entities. There are several entities attached to several different control systems. The one that is attached to the Old Testament was known as Jehovah or Yahweh. He requested a very specific set of energetic investments, right? You had to kill things in great number to receive the favor of Yahweh. And so that is a negative, but it was used, right? The force itself is blind. It can be directed by the will of man, either for the good or the bad. And the prevailing opinion of the Jews was that they had to feed this entity. And so all of their intentions feed that entity. If you are energetically aligned with an entity, then you are energetically feeding that energy to that entity and thereby empowering that entity. So if you are in accordance with the prevailing opinions, you are lending yourself to that. And it is influenced by it, right? Our resurgence of liberty is directly related to the prevailing opinions. Whenever we had prohibition, it was directly related to the prevailing opinions. It is blind, right? Now, that's not putting prohibition into the level of manifestation, but it can be directed either for the positive or the negative. That is entirely up to you and your understanding of what you are doing. This universal fluid, if we decide to regard it as a fluid, being the common medium of all nervous organisms and the vehicle of all sensitive vibrations, establishes an actual physical solidarity between impressionable persons and transmit from one to another the impressions of imagination and of thought. That is not entirely untrue. Now, directly influencing the will of someone else is a problem. Remember that. But, yes, right, that's the spirit. That is quite literally all electricity. So all nervous organisms, yes. The part that makes your fingers wiggle, that's the spirit. The electrical current that is created when you decide to wiggle your fingers. Your breath is handled by that. Your heartbeat is handled by that. And so, yes, all nervous organisms. And the vehicle of all sensitive vibrations. It is the air. It carries the sound which reaches your ears, which is a sensitive vibration. So, again, yes. The movement of the inert object, determined by the undulations of the universal agent, obeys the ruling impression and reproduces in its revelations at one time all the lucidity of the most wonderful visions, and at another all the eccentricity and falsehood of the most vague and incoherent dreams. The blows resounding on furniture, the clattering of dishes, the self-playing of musical instruments are illusions produced by the same cause. The miracles of the convulsionaries of St. Medard were of the same order and seemed frequently to suspend the laws of nature. On the one hand, exaggeration produced by fascination, which is the special quality of intoxication, occasioned by congestions of the astral light. On the other, actual oscillations or movements impressed upon inert matter by the subtle and universal agent of motion and life. Such is the sole foundation of these occurrences which look so marvelous, as we may easily demonstrate at will, by reproducing in accordance with these rules laid down in the ritual, the most astounding of these phenomena, establishing, as can be done quite simply, the absence of trickery, hallucination, or error. It has frequently happened to me after experiments in the magic chain, performed with persons devoid of good intention or sympathy, that I have been awakened with a start in the night by truly alarming impressions and sensations. On one such occasion I felt vividly the pressure of an unknown hand attempting to strangle me. I believe that, considering your book. I rose up, relighted my lamp, and set myself calmly to work, seeking to profit by my wakefulness and to drive away the phantoms of sleep. The books about me were moved with much noise. Papers were disturbed and rubbed against one another. Timber creaked as if on the point of splitting, and heavy blows resounded on the ceiling. With curiosity, but also with tranquillity, I observed all these phenomena, which would not have been less wonderful had they been only the product of my imagination, so real did they seem. For the rest, I may state that I was in no sense frightened, and during this occurrence I was engaged upon something quite foreign to occult sciences. By the repetition of similar phenomena, I was led to attempt the experience of evocation, assisted by the magical ceremonies of the ancients, when I obtained truly astounding results, which will be set forth in the 13th chapter of this work, which is going to bring us to the end of this discussion. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a difficult set of topics. I understand I have some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. Once again, defining what I know from what is speculated is important to me. It doesn't have to be to you, but apparently it is. You're still here. I do not speak because I read it in a book somewhere. I do not speak because someone told me this thing. I speak because I have knowledge of a thing which has worked, at least for me. I personally have been able to heal myself personally with the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. Some people will take that as blasphemy. I don't care, right? I don't care if you think I'm crazy because I believe in magic. I have evidence. That's all I need. I am here to relay to you what that evidence is, but I can't convince you. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you. I know some things. I don't know all things. I don't claim to be a master, but I am at least an adept. I have at least done something that puts me on the level of someone who knows something. And I'm here to relay you those things which I know. And most of the things which I have disagreed with, I know to be incorrect. I cannot convince you of that. This has been written a long time. Many people have done this. They did not bear fruit. We know that because it is not popular. If it was popular that these things worked, right? This book has been read so many times that if you were to put it into practice, say 1,000 people read it, and 900 of them were able to replicate it, it would be universal by now. It's not, because it's not. It is obvious right here at the end of this chapter, right? These things that happened to him, he didn't know it was going to happen. He didn't know that there was going to be a hand on his throat attempting to strangle him, but there was an unknown hand attempting to strangle me, but I was in no sense frightened. Are you fucking kidding me? You wake up from a dead sleep without the ability to breathe and have pressure on your throat as though there is a hand there, but you weren't frightened. Liar. Right? He turned away from the things that he taught. His life ended with him back where he began, which, by the way, he forsook these oaths, took some more oaths in direct contrariness to these oaths, and then forsook those oaths too, and then made a whole new set of oaths, and then forsook those oaths too. That's a problem, a little bit. If this would have been true, if it was able to be able to do this in real life, he would not have turned away from it. You don't turn away from the truth. You turn away from a lie. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was stated, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, consider hitting me with that super thanks. Consider joining with a membership or picking up a copy of my book. If there's another work you would like to see me discuss, drop that in the comments as well. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.